So welcome to the MC101 hosted by Keycode Education. Again, as I said, my name is Jonathan Amayo. We have both internal students taking the class, but we're also broadcasting this live on Facebook and YouTube. So everyone joining us on this live stream, hey, from Los Angeles, California. Hope everyone's keeping safe. Today we're going to go through Media Composer, but before we do that, I just want to talk quickly about Keycode Media and Keycode Education. So Keycode Media, as you probably know, is one of the best broadcast and post-production system integrators. Actually, during this pandemic, we've had to pivot and do many remote engineering projects that have actually just been amazing. But since we sell so much gear, we have to do training on that gear, and that's where Keycode Education comes from. Now, Keycode Education offers classes in Resolve, Media Composer, all post-production and production products that you can think of, Apple, Adobe. Today, obviously, we're going to focus on Avid. So Matt and Levi, I want to make sure you guys have downloaded a version of Media Composer from Avid's website. And if you guys have never been to, oops, I realize I'm not sharing my screen, so you can't see this. So let me just share it to you. So this is Avid's website. And if you just go to the Media Composer, if you guys haven't already done so, you can download a trial of Media Composer Ultimate or First for 30 days, run it for free. Or you can download Media Composer First, which that will run forever, as you guys probably know already. And then the second thing I want to make sure, Levi and Matt, and for anybody who wants to join us on Facebook, if you go to this website right here, editstock.com/product/MC101, you'll find all of the media needed for this class. So the media and the project files are located online, free to download for anybody joining us outside of Matt and Levi, who I know are in the class. And they take only maybe 20, 30 minutes to download, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and get into Avid and talk a little bit about the MC Fundamentals class that you've decided to join. This is really a great class in that it introduces you to Media Composer. And you got to think about Media Composer as really the OG, the original editing system that outlasted the first wave of nonlinear systems. Pretty much every system out there is kind of based on it. Avid is an industry standard in Hollywood. Almost 80 to 90% of TV shows and films are cut on it. It has maybe the greatest shared storage system available that is easily accessible and easy to use. Plus, I know this isn't sexy, its media management is above everybody else's. Still to this day, without even an asset manager built in, Avid's media management is superb. And then of course it's cross-platform, both Mac and PC. And as I mentioned before, there's a free version of it. So you can use it from high school all the way up to the pro level. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and launch Media Composer. I'm assuming Matt and Levi, you guys have downloaded Media Composer. I just want to make sure you guys have. Matt, Levi, do you guys have it on your computers? And anyone on the Facebook world, if you haven't downloaded it, don't forget you can go to avid.com/Media Composer. See messages. Yep. Okay. All right. So it sounds like the students have Media Composer. So we're going to go ahead and share our screen. And I'm running Media Composer 2019.12. You can be running multiple versions. This product has been around, wow. I've been on this product since 1994. So this product is quite old. It's been around for a long, long time. I'm currently running, again, Media Composer Ultimate version 2019.12. You might be running a different version, people on Facebook at home, 2018 or 8.9. Your Media Composer might look a little different from mine, and I will make sure to explain the differences. So if anyone has any questions, please just stop and ask. All right, so we're launching Media Composer. And if I could have Matt and Levi open up your books, if you wouldn't mind going to Module 1, page 2, we're just going to jump into the first module. Now, this module is an overview of Media Composer, and we're not really going to get into the how to edit phase. We're just going to kind of identify all the elements within the application, how you launch it, how you get through. If everyone has the application launched, let me just see here. Do we have any questions? Nope. All right. So you'll notice here we have our project our project window, which allows us to select the projects that we have available. We're going to get into this a little bit deeper in the next module, but we have different locations for those projects. We have something known as a user profile versus a user. Now, I do want to differentiate that right now. The user is the person logged into the computer. The user profile allows you to differentiate different people using the computer under the same username. So for instance, at a college, you might have a different username for every person who logs into that computer. But maybe if you work at NBC, it's just called Avid1, and you have a nighttime editor and a daytime editor. Well, the daytime editor might want to have a different profile than the nighttime editor because they have different keyboard shortcuts. And then we have our project details over here to the right, and we only have one project, Rock Climber. If you've set up everything correctly, if you haven't, we'll take a second and talk about that. And we also have the option for new project. I'm just going to select the Rock Climber project and jump right into explaining what Media Composer looks like when you first launch it. All right, now if you look up at this screen, it kind of looks confusing, but you can break Media Composer into three basic elements. You have the bin container area where all of your resources are located. You have the composer window, which is essentially how you look at your footage. And then you have your timeline, which is how you assemble your footage, right? If we take a look at the composer window is broken into two different windows. The source window, which is our source footage. This is footage that we want to edit into our clip. Notice it's changing. And then we have what we call the record window. And this window is directly tied to the timeline. Think of it as if you were a music composer. The timeline is where we write our notes. And this is where we hear the music of the notes we've written, right? So you'll notice that the blue indicator bar within the record window directly correlates with the timeline. If I move that blue bar in the timeline, it moves in the record window and vice versa. The other thing I want to point out, I'm on page 6, by the way, if you're following along in the books, at the top of the page, there are source track selector windows, which we're going to get into more detail about later. These can be a little confusing at first, but once you get your head wrapped around them, it's really simple. The idea here being is, do I want to patch audio 1 from my source to audio 1 of my timeline, or do I want to put audio 1, which might be music, to audio 3 or audio 4? Typically, we set up our timeline in this particular way depending on the TV show or project that we're working on. And the location that you might work at might have standards for where you put your audio, meaning i.e. audio goes to V5 and V6, narration goes to V1, V2, ambient sound goes to V3, V4. The bin window. Now, the bin window is one of the main new differences in 2019 versus all the other versions of Media Composer. If you're on Facebook Live and you're running an older version of Media Composer, you're not going to have a bin container window. You're going to have what they call a project window. The bin container and project window are very similar. The difference really being is that when you close a bin container window, it doesn't close the project. And there are no settings located in the bin container window. If you're using an older version of Media Composer, you'll have tabs up here at the top with settings. But in the new version of Media Composer, notice there are no settings up here. And I can have multiple bin container windows open. Here I have a separate bin. I'm going to drag it, pull it away from that bin. And now notice I have two different bin container windows. In the older versions of Media Composer, you could only ever have one project window open. So this actually gives you a little bit more flexibility because the bin container is going to hold all of the resources that you use within Media Composer. All right. Now, one of the tips that it mentions at the bottom of page number 6 is opening bins, and I have bins open already. So let me close these two bins. But to open a bin, you can do a couple of different ways. You can double click on the bin, or you can right click on the bin and open selected bin. And let me point out something unique to Media Composer. There are these things up here where they're like two dashes. A long time ago, we used to refer to these as the hamburger menu because it looks like a hamburger, like you want to take a big bite. But these are actually referred to as the fast menus. And these are contextual menus that will change depending on the location of the application that you click. So you're going to see these little fast menus everywhere within the application. Notice I see one in my bin container window. and I'm going to see one in my bin, and I'm going to see one in my timeline, and you can map them to different points in the interface. So when you see these two dashes, that equals a fast menu, and that's basically a contextual menu with shortcuts to whatever you might need right away at your disposal. All right. Now, to open up a bin, as it mentions, double click it or right click and open selected bin. And notice, oops, I only have one bin open up. Let me open up the second bin. Notice when I open up bins, or if I create a new bin, they automatically tab into these new tab-based interface windows. This is the way the bin is essentially now laid out with these tabs by default. We're going to talk about different ways you can assemble your bin, but by default, it's going to move into this tab window for the obvious reason, organization, so that you can see things clearer. But sometimes people like to work with bins and floating areas, move around. We're going to get to that. We're going to come back to that. Before we do that, let's talk about how we can change the views of the bins. Now, I'm on the bottom of page number 8. And on the bottom of page 8, it talks about your bin views, which are up at the top of the bin. Now, the most common bin view everybody uses to my knowledge is text view. It is quick, it's easy, and if you organize your clips properly, you'll know exactly what's where and where you need them to be. But there are two other views. There are frame view, which is actually really popular for people who are just starting out. In frame view, you'll notice that you have the ability to make your frames larger and smaller with the scroll wheel up in the left-hand column. And or on page number 10, it mentions you can hit Command L or Control L if you're on a Windows machine, and Command K to make it smaller. Command L to make large, and Command K to make K small. It's the German small, the K small. Why can't we use Command S to make small? Because in every application, Command S is typically reserved for saving. So in this world, we're using the German K small, Command K. And I want to make sure you understand something about Media Composer. These shortcuts are going to work universally wherever we go. So if we want to go to our tracks and make them bigger in the timeline, Command K, Command L. Command K, Command L. It's also in the book on page 10. And I'm going to point out that once you let work in bin view, a lot of people, or in frame view, a lot of people like to organize their bins basically like shot sequence. So, okay, I want this shot first, and maybe this boulder shot second, and maybe this shot third, this shot fourth. And it's going to go obviously from top to bottom, left to right in the order in which I organize them. Now, if I want this window to become organized, there's a couple of options that I can choose. You can, of course, right click within the window to get our align windows, but we're going to try to stick to using the fast menu in the beginning. And then we'll use the other shortcuts. One of the crazy things about Media Composer that both is amazing and can drive you crazy sometimes is that there is 10 ways to do one thing. You can do it so many different ways. Right click, shortcuts, using command shortcuts. Once you get good with the software, you'll discover what works best for you. But I will remind you that from my career as an editor, I found that I changed the way I use the software depending on the type of project that I was editing. From a feature film to doing short form editorial, you need different tools. So I'm going to go back up here at the top to frame view, to our fast menu. And you notice we have a couple of options here, fill window and fill sorted. Now, again, the fast menu are contextual menus located close to windows that you're currently operating, and they give you options based on what you're doing. So this fast menu is only for the bin. Notice the fast menu in the bin container window is only for the bin container. I'm going to use the fast menu in the bin, and I want to choose fill window. And what fill window is going to do is it's going to fill everything and keep it in order. While if I had chose fill sorted, it would reorder them based on the text information, i.e. alphabetically or numerically. So the difference between the two, and it mentions this on the top page 11, fill window just fills and organizes the clips based on where they're currently located. And fill sorted will actually reorganize them alphabetically or numerically. Does that make sense for everyone? All right, now it mentions on the bottom of page 11 when you're in frame view, and let me make my frames a little bit bigger Command L, Command L. Also, you can use the scroll bar here, don't forget. Now, maybe I don't like this frame as my representative frame. So on the bottom of page 11, it points out that your keyboard is hardwired for certain keys. And keys 1 and 2 on your keyboard are for moving 10 frames backwards and 10 frames forward. And keys 3 and 4 are for moving 1 frame forward and 1 frame backwards. I can use these keys. I'm going to hit the 2 key on this clip. And notice it's going to change the representative frame that I see in the bin. Maybe I don't want to see, for instance, on this clip, I want to see what he's looking at, or if it actually shows me what he's looking at. There it is. Maybe, or I want to keep it on him because obviously the other person is not important for that shot. But you can tell by using the 1, 2, and 3, and 4 keys that you can change the representative frame that we're actually looking at in our bin so that the editor, if they're working in frame view, can get a better representation of what the clip is all about. All right. I'm going to go ahead and flip over to page 12. And the last few that we haven't talked about, gentlemen and ladies, everybody out there on Facebook, is script view. Now, script view is a combination of text view and frame view, except you can add comments like audio, music, or this is a great interview. I find that I probably use text view 95% of the time. But I have, if you were to ask, use script view over frame view within productions, because when I just want to see comments based on producers' feedback, script view is great. Too long on this shot. All right, so now that we've gone through the bins, hopefully everybody feels comfortable, basic understanding the composer window. Again, let me just launch a sequence so we can see what a sequence looks like. We have the composer window, which consists of the source and the record window. We've got our timeline. Remember, this is a graphical representation of what we see in the record window, directly correlates those blue bars. And then we have our repository for our bins. We have the bin container window and the actual bins themselves here at the top. We can view these bins in different manner by clicking these icons for text view, frame view, or script view. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk about user profiles because it's one of the first things we're going to create in the first exercise when we're done here. And the user profile, this is actually one of the big differences between Media Composer 2019 and everything else. So Matt and Levi, I believe you guys work at New Edit, and so you deal with the rental world, and I know you're going to see a lot of different versions of Avid. This is where 2019 is different than 2018, 8.9, 8.4, and everything else. In the earlier versions of Media Composer, you would have a settings tab here at the top. In 2019 and beyond, settings is going to be located in the file menu. Now, ironically, you can also get to settings from the preference menu, which in the world of Mac, there is something called an application menu. And in the world of Mac, all settings should be located under the preference. And if you notice, when I choose that, it actually launches the same setting. But on a Windows machine, you aren't going to have an application menu like this. So you're just going to be able to find your settings under settings, file settings. There is where settings have moved to in 2019, while in earlier versions, it was located right there in the project window. Now, we want to click on the user settings, and this is where we're going to be able to create a new user profile. Notice here, I only have the user profile of the person currently logged into the machine, but I'm going to go ahead and create one for myself. All right, so the next thing the book talks about, now that I have a user profile, let's personalize the system a little bit, right? And the first thing we can do with personalizing the system is we can work with something called workspaces. Now, workspaces have been around for a long, long time. It's just that Avid has reintroduced them with little icons on the right-hand side in 2019. In the past, they would be located under the Windows menu, and you would have different workspaces you could choose from, and you could map them yourself to the keyboard. But today you can just find them currently right there on the right-hand side. Notice how it flips me quickly between an effects mode, audio mode, and edit mode. Now, I personally really love these workspaces. One of the reasons why is because you can open up and close tabs. So for instance, I can open up, let's say the audio tool and snap that somewhere where I want it. Let's see right there. And if I want that gone, I can just click back to my normal edit workspace and it's gone. So if I screw up my interface, the workspace, like for instance, I close the composer window, timeline window, let's close something here, screw it up and make it look really horrible. I can just hit the edit button and it brings everything back to default. And usually when I'm in Avid and something's gone wrong, it's because I have something selected that I don't see. So by clicking that edit workspace, it brings me back to a default position where I can see everything. So it's a great tool for troubleshooting in the beginning because you might have too many windows open or you can't find something. We're using the workspaces. It's just a really powerful tool. Now, let's talk about that snapping a little bit, which it covers on page 14. On page 14, it mentions if I go ahead and open up a tool like the audio tool. This is a tool. And one of the rules I want to kind of lay out that the book is going to get to in a second is tools can snap with tools and bins can snap with bins, meaning that my audio tool can't snap to a bin, but it can snap to the timelines, the composer window. You see where all these green markers are? This is telling me exactly where I can snap this application to, this little tool to. So those green highlighted marks you see there, it's telling me where it's going to snap and what the preview is going to look like. Sometimes you're not going to love the snapping, and I'll show you what I mean by when I get to the bins. But let's say I want that audio mixer there, the audio tool there, excuse me.
About to do as I
can go to my current workspace, which is the edit workspace, and save this as the current. Now when I go between color and edit, notice my audio tool is opened up. Again, I'm going to show you this one more time. I'm going to go and open up the audio mixer. And remember, audio mixer cannot snap to a bin. It's a tool, so it can only snap to another tool. If you look at your interface, the minute you move it, all of these little green sections are highlighting exactly where you could snap it. I'm going to put the audio mixer over here to the left, right? I'm going to go up to my workspace. You see the little arrow up here? Make sure everyone can see this. And I'm going to save current. This is going to now make this the default interface for editorial. I now have an audio tool so I can see my meters when I play. And so I can adjust my levels with my audio mixer. Now, if I'm not happy with this interface because I've left working on a feature film and now I'm working on a broadcast news story, I can always click and restore current workspace to default, and it will get rid of all of those special changes I made at any point. Does that make sense? Just making sure. No questions, okay. All right, so let's talk about the bin snapping a little bit because the bin snapping works the same way. When we grab our bin, notice that the bin lights up and you get these areas to where the bin snapping. Notice that the bin can snap to much less areas than tools because again, bins snap with bins, tools snap with tools. Now, I find when I snap a bin, I like to snap it to the left and right. You can see the preview of what's going to do. And you can see that it kind of does a decent job of making them equal size, but you may not love that. You notice if I snap it to the top, it kind of forced all my other bins down a little. So the snapping sometimes won't give you necessarily the perfect result, but you can resize your windows at any point if you're trying to copy to and from a bin. Now, if I don't want the windows to snap and I want them to go back into tabbing, if I hold down the Option or Alt key on my keyboard, notice that it tabs back into the window. If I don't hold the Option or Alt key down, it will snap. And again, the snap may or may not be what you want. This is a perfect snap in my opinion, because left to right, I can copy a clip from here over here. Look at that, it's easy, drag and drop. When I snap from top to bottom, I find sometimes it doesn't perfectly resize it, so you have to pull the bin up a little bit, if that makes sense. As you can see, there's my sequence bin. So I'm a bigger fan of snapping from left to right, but I'll be honest with you, I've become an even bigger fan of just tabbing. And to tab again, we don't just pull the bin, we hold the modifier key Option, or if we're on a Windows machine, Alt, and we use that to tab it into the bin. And so I'm going to tab this one over, and you notice all my bins are back to being tabbed in one row. And I can drop down and select any of these bins at any time through this little drop down menu at the top, or by just clicking the bin, or by going in the bin container window and double clicking the bin there. So there's multiple ways to access your bin, to get to your bin, and to move your bin around the window. All right, I'm on page 16 in the book if you're following along. And we were talking about bins and moving bins around and snapping. I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable again. Snapping, you look for the green areas, bins, snap with bins. A bin is essentially a repository for all of your clips. And our tools, snap with tools. So if I open under the tools menu and I grab the audio tool, would be the only tool I would recommend opening at this point if you've never used Media Composer. If I grab this tool, notice how where it snaps is going to be different than where my bins snap. Excellent. All right. I'm going to keep going on. So on the bottom of page 16, it kind of gets into the idea of pulling your bin away and making its own floating window. Instead of snapping and instead of tabbing by holding the Option key down, remember, snapping is when you drag, tabbing is when you hold the Option key down and you put it at the top. What happens if you just want a floating bin? Well, there's two ways you can go about floating a bin. One way is grabbing the bin and dragging it over to the bin container window, and it will just snap open into its own new window with its own separate bin container window. As I pointed out, this is one of the differences between 2019 and every version that came previous. In Media Composer 2018 and before, all clips, there was only ever one project window. But with Media Composer 2019, you can have multiple bin container windows. You can hide them. Notice here I can just resize it and get rid of it if I don't want to see it, but it's always technically there. So one more time, if I want to have a bin open up, normally it tabs, but if I want that bin to be in a floating window by itself, merely grab the bin, don't snap it, just drag it to the bin container window and it snaps open to itself. Now, the other way you can do this is you can select that bin and you can go to the fast menu, and you notice up here at the top, we have the option of open selected bin in one window. This will do the same thing. So two different ways of going about the same thing. As I mentioned before, with Avid, you get always multiple options. Some people like to drag and drop. Some people like to be meticulous and use in and out points to edit. Avid allows you to do both. All right, so I think we've beat to death the bin option here. I just want to make sure everybody there's no questions. Anybody Q&A? Nope. All right. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump over to page number 17 at the bottom of the page. And it talks about changing the interface's color. Now, by default, the interface defaults to a gray color. Does everyone remember where we can find settings under the file menu? Now, I want to point out something here. Notice there's a shortcut associated with that. We're going to go over shortcuts in a little bit. I want to keep everything a little simple, but I'm pointing it out for now just to kind of dip your feet in a puddle. A lot of our settings have shortcuts. So experienced advanced editors who have been using Avid for years rarely ever go into the menus because they have memorized the shortcuts for the tools and the options they need. And I am one of those people who recommend, if you're doing a function repeatedly over and over, it doesn't hurt to learn a shortcut. All right, so we're going to go ahead, if you remember, and launch settings from File, Settings again. And this time we're going to go in and we're going to talk about the interface. Now the interface is a user-based setting. And if you take a look at these settings, they are broken into 4 categories. You have format, which are basically what format are you in? What's your project format? You have your project settings. These are settings that are universal to the project. You have users. These are settings that are based on your particular likes or dislikes, your preferences. And then you have site settings. These are ways for you to take a setting that, let's say I like. I trained all my editors on a keyboard. I can make my keyboard the default keyboard for everybody. That's what a site setting is. Let's go back to user setting, if you would, please. And we're going to scroll down to interface. It's alphabetical, so it should be pretty quickly defined. And you'll notice also there's a lot of little drop arrows, which will make your settings smaller. If you see that drop down arrow, it's basically telling you you have multiple options. It's something we're going to talk about in 2 minutes. But first, let's click on the interface setting. And you'll notice here we have the ability to change the interface from dark to light. And let me apply that so you can see what it looks like. I much more prefer the darker interface, but again, this is a preference, it's up to you. You can also change the highlight color from white to purple. And again, this is a preference, up to you and how you want to change those colors. The next thing it talks about when it talks about mapping or customizing our system, and again, before I close out, what we just covered was the interface, file, settings, and to change the color of your Avid Media Composer, double click on interface and click the color you like. Do you like it dark or light? Again, I like it darker, so I'm going to hit apply for that. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we're going to cover is mapping user buttons. And in order to map user buttons, this is on the top of page 19, we're going to need to understand something called the command palette. Now, one easy way to think of Media Composer is it puts all of the tools in one central location called the tools menu. And it makes it really easy for if you're looking for a tool, it's usually located within the tools menu. Now, the tool we're going to need to work with is something called the command palette. And the command palette has a shortcut, notice Command 3, and is located near the bottom of the tools menu. One comment I want to make, unfortunately, the tools menu is not perfectly alphabetically in order, as you noticed. So you might want to get familiar with this menu if you plan on using Media Composer as an editor, because it just makes it easier to find what you're looking for. So the command palette, I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And you can see that I've got a couple of options here. First thing I want to mention is the command palette breaks down the buttons based on their functionality. So move buttons are located here. You have your play buttons, stop, record. Edit buttons, override, splice, replace, edit. Your trim buttons, your effects. And then you even have categories where they couldn't categorize the button, so they put it under other. And so like a blank button, if you want to get rid of a button, it would be under the other. Notice there's a workspace tab as well. Now, when mapping buttons, you'll notice down here we have 3 options. We have button-to-button reassignment, active palette, and menu-to-button reassignment. One second, let me just grab a sip of water. All right, so the button-to-button reassignment, kind of like an iPhone, even though our icons don't go wiggly, like when you go to change or rearrange your iPhone, this is kind of what happens in Media Composer once you launch the command palette. Notice I really can't hit play. There's a little finger there, an index finger pointing me, where do you want to map? Because right now it's assuming that I want to do a button-to-button reassignment. Now I can map whatever I want, wherever I want. I can grab the smart tool and drag it over here and map that button very easily. But if I want to actually use this command palette, I can change it to an active palette. And now if I hit play, it plays.
Just touching the rock, that really just brings me closer with the rock and with nature. I get the opportunity.
Now, the third option within the command palette is something called the menu to button reassignment. And this is, I think, one of Avid's coolest features. Unlike button to button reassignment, what this allows you to do is select a button. I selected my button down here. and then select the menu, let's say settings, and literally map the settings menu to a button. So it allows you to take any of these options at the top and map them uniquely as buttons to not just your interface, but to also your keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this to an active palette for a second. And I'm going to go under File and launch Settings, which remember I had just mapped there. And I want to go ahead and launch the keyboard setting. So go ahead and do that if you would, please, everyone. Now, notice here, when I move this back to button reassignment, I can now add the trim tool to F3. I can add the play button to F8. If I want to do a menu to button reassignment, unlike button to button reassignment where it's drag and drop, menu to button reassignment requires that you first select the menu, or sorry, you first select the button, then you select the menu. New bin. First select the button, then select the menu. Audio tool. Unlike button to button, which is just drag and drop. Let's go to other, clear out some of the buttons I made, drag and drop. If I want to get rid of buttons, I want to keep it blank. Under the other category, that's where Avid uses the blank one, so that if you want to get, you made a mistake, you did not want to put play on F4, we'll just drag the blank one onto F4 and that gets rid of that for you. Now, here's one other cool thing I want to point out before we leave the keyboard. You actually have two keyboards built into one. You have the standard keyboard, but you also have the shift keyboard, which means if you hold Shift S or Shift H or Shift I, it will do something if you wanted to. Meaning I can have my tool palette mapped to Shift T instead of having the marker located there. And I can have, let's say, let me just look for one that's fun. Find bin mapped to Shift F, because that makes more sense to me. So there are actually two keyboards that you're able to map to, the standard keyboard, and if you were to do the modifier keyboard, the shift keyboard, the Shift S, the Shift A, the Shift, whatever combination of keys you can think of. Depending on how much you edit, you will actually take full advantage of all of these options. All right, I'm going to close out the keyboard option. I think we've gone over that thoroughly. And we're going to jump into the last little bit of this module, which is autosaving. Now, autosaving, again, can be found in the settings. We spent a lot of the last little bit of this module in settings because we're customizing the system really based on what you like. And the autosave functionality is located under the bin setting. And here we are at the top, and we'll see the autosave intervals and the inactive period and the forced autosave. Now, let's talk about this for a second. To save, everyone has to have been burnt at one time or another. I'm assuming everybody out there has lost a file at some point, and now they back up to a cloud. I personally back up to multiple cloud locations and a local hard drive for my home systems. My autosaves used to be on older systems, 5 minutes, 4 minutes. And I'm talking version 7 in 1998. But today, the system is a lot more stable. The operating systems are a lot more stable. I don't really change my autosave to every 5 minutes because one, I personally like to save, meaning when you hit Command S, that's the same as autosaving. Two, 15 minutes is not that long of a period. What it basically means is if you crash, totally crash the system and the operating system, and it saves nothing for the last 15 minutes, your work will have autosaved in an autosave vault somewhere hidden in the operating system 15 minutes back. So you might lose up to 15 minutes of work. And so if you're terrified of losing up to 15 minutes of work, then you might want to shorten this to 5 minutes. But I find that 15 minutes of work in the editorial world is usually maybe 3 or 4 cuts. And usually, unless you're in short form editorial or you work in broadcast where speed is the key, this will really depend on your experience, your workflow, your system. And I would also defer to your your shop preferences, meaning what your shop prefers to keep it to. But if it's your home system, I personally believe the defaults are perfectly fine, 15 minutes. And at 17 minutes, it will force autosave, meaning if it doesn't see you. And at 15 minutes, it will look to see if you're inactive on the system, forcing it to autosave again. You can shorten these, you can make them longer. It's up to you. But I find that 15 minutes is more than enough. All right, any questions about the autosave functionality? Let's see here. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm gonna move on. And I'm gonna stop sharing for just 1 second to just kind of go back over what we covered here. Remember, this first module, what we just did was an overview of the software. We took a look at what was Media Composer, the timeline, the composer window, and then the bin container. We talked about how the windows interact with each other. Remember, we said bins can work with bins and tools work with tools. And we talked a little bit about personal preferences with the system. We set up a profile. We then took that profile and we modified the interface, whether we liked it light or dark. And then we mapped new buttons to our keyboard and to our interface, depending if you mapped a button or you mapped a menu. On page number 26, it gets into an exercise. And so how I'm going to handle the exercises, and I see messages down here. How we're going to handle the exercises is I was going to call them out, but we were going to do them together, Matt and Levi. And again, if anybody else wants to join in on these exercises on Facebook Live, they can be located at editstock.com/product/MC101. And I'm using the 2019 version of the software. So if you actually want to work on these projects with us live, otherwise, Matt and Levi, we're going to go ahead and jump into exercise 1, which is on page 26. If you guys can hear me, I'm switching back to the software in a second, but I just want to make sure everyone's cool. All right, so I'm going to go back into the software. And you'll notice on page exercise 1, page 26, the first thing it has you do is launch Media Composer. Now, we've already launched Media Composer, so we're going to kind of close the project instead, and it takes us back to this interface window. Now, one of the first things it has you do in step number 2 is create a user profile. Gentlemen, if you haven't done so, create a user profile for your version of Avid. And I'm assuming everyone here has. I'm going to create another one. Let's call this one John Deere. All right. And then it talks about the locations of your projects. Now, Matt and Levi, if you set everything up correctly, you should see your rock climber project located here. Do you guys see your rock climber project? And I just want to see any answers. Do you guys see? You don't see your rock climbing project. Okay. So maybe your rock climbing project hasn't. Did you download the Avid, the media for the Avid software? Sorry, did you download the media from Edit Stock last night? And yep, you did. Okay, awesome. So if you flip into the book to page Roman numeral number 10, it's all the way back before the first module. This is, and I know you two gentlemen got your books last minute, and I know it was a last minute sign up. So there was a little last minuteness to signing you two gentlemen up. But if you look on page Roman numeral 10, not the letters, Roman numeral, it'll show you the files, and then it'll show you where you need to put those files on the computer's hard drive. So when you download the media from Avid, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. I'm going to make a new file in the Finder window. So when you download the media from Avid, what Avid wants you to do is grab the Avid media files folder. You should see on your desktop, 101, new kit. You should basically see a new media kit like this. And the Jacuzzi file, you just want to drag that to your desktop. But within the Media Composer file, the Avid media files folder, you want to drag that, and that's going to be not on the desktop, but at the root level of your computer. So where you can drag that to is literally right there, that location on your computer within that hard drive. And that's where your Avid media file should be located, on the root level of the internal hard drive, if that makes sense. And then there's one other file, which is the project file. And the project file is going to get located. I've already moved my project file, of course. But if I was to find my project file and where to put it, you're going to put your project file under user shared Avid Media Composer. And I'm going to make this so it's longer so you can see what I'm doing. And Avid shared projects. So your projects go into a shared directory. And your media is just going to go to the root level of the hard drive. Did that work for anyone? Just checking the messages. Yes, I have it downloaded. And did you guys get it copied to the right location so that you see it within the project window? And if so, that you should see something like this, where it shows you the Rock Climber window. Let me get rid of that Finder window, where it shows you the Rock Climber window when you log in. This is what we kind of want to see when we log into the software. All right, let me just stop sharing, see if everyone, are we seeing that? Yeah, I'm on Windows, so hard to follow. Oh, you're on Windows. So on Windows, the shared folder directory is in a little bit of a different location. It's located under library/public documents/shared Avid projects. So one more time, library/public documents/shared Avid projects. Just typing in the path for you there. So maybe that'll help. Yeah, Mac and Windows have different locations, but if you look on Roman numeral page 10 in your book, again, not the actual page number, but Roman numeral page 10, there should be a little location set up for where we're going to actually put the media and the project files based on Mac or Windows. I know you two gentlemen got your books late, so I know that there could be some confusion on that. But all right. So I'm going to keep going for a little bit and through this exercise, and if you're able to follow along, that's perfect. If you're not, don't worry. We're gonna recap everything a little bit later this afternoon, and we're gonna have this as a recorded video for you to be able to rewatch it anytime at your leisure. So after this presentation is over, we will be posting this video. For students participating, you will get an email of the video. So I'm gonna go ahead and share again, and let's go ahead and get back into Media Composer. And as I mentioned before, what we want to do is create a new user profile, and hopefully you can see your Rock Climber project. Now, what we're basically doing here in our Rock Climber project, now look at this, my interface is all kind of gooey. I'm just going to hit the edit workspace here, and notice that I've basically just got a bunch of floating bins. So I'm just going to close all those windows because I don't want a bunch of floating bins, and I'm going to open them up where they default to the tab. Now, here is what the exercise is going to want you to do on step number 2 on page 27 is we're going to start to do some organization for our bins. Right now, the way we have it set up is we have a sequence bin and we have a bin with all of our Rock Climber clips. And we want to kind of separate that out a little bit. So we're going to make a bunch of new bins. Let's say 3 new bins. You can make a new bin 3 different ways. You can use the fast menu, and we have the option for new bin. Under the file menu, the option new bin, you can right click in the bin container window, new bin, and of course you can hit Command N, which will create a new bin. I'm going to create one more new bin so that we have essentially 3 new bins on top of our sequences and our Rock Climber clips. All right. I'm going to rename one of the bins titles. Now, in order to rename a bin, don't click on the icon, click on the name. You notice how it highlights differently when you click on the name versus the icon. Let me zoom in here so you can see it. Name versus the icon, name versus the icon. So I'm going to click on the name and we're going to change this one to titles. Perfect. And then I'm going to click on another bin and we're going to change this one to music. Perfect. I don't need this last bin that I created. Turns out I just made an extra bin. So we're going to select this bin and there's a couple of different ways we can get rid of it. We can right click, delete selected bin. We can go to the fast menu and delete selected bin. Or we can click on the bin and hit delete. Oops. Click on the bin and hit delete, and it should delete selected bin. And notice it puts it in something called the trash. Now, what it basically is doing is saying is, listen, I'm not actually deleting the bin because I don't know if you actually need this bin later. We're just going to move this bin to a trash bin. And you're going to have to tell me you really don't want that bin. For instance, watch this. When you go to empty the trash, it comes up and says, hey, are you sure you want to empty this trash? And notice by default, the option is don't empty because deletion is a destructive process and kills, meaning you may need that file again one day. So Avid is always going to lean on the cautious side of when you're deleting material. Are you sure you're sure before you empty the trash? In this case, I'm sure. So I'm going to empty the trash and notice that file goes away. Very simple, very easy. Again, one more time, let me show you how to create a new bin. Right click in the bin, new bin, or sorry, right click in the bin container window, choose new bin, or from the fast menu at the top, new bin, or the file menu within Media Composer, new bin. And then, of course, now that we're starting to notice these shortcuts, that squiggly mark is a command for Mac and control for Windows. Command for Mac and control for Windows. So if I hit Command N or Control N, it allows me to create a new bin with a shortcut. And then to delete this unwanted bin, I can right click on it, delete selected bin, fast menu, or just click on the bin itself and hit the delete key on the keyboard. I should mention, it's the delete key on the extended keyboard. If you're using a full keyboard and not the delete key above the enter button, this is for the extended keyboard if you're using it. And remember, in order to empty the trash, you have to specifically choose empty the trash, and then you have to specifically choose, yeah, I want to get rid of that. I want to do something destructive. That's what Avid's basically putting up all these cautious flags for. Because the idea here is, are you going to be doing something destructive in the software? All right, moving on from that, we're on page number 28 in the book, and we're just basically talking about organizing our bins. I one time worked on a project that had over 192 bins, and that's nothing. I've seen projects with 300-400 bins. So this window can get out of control. And we want more organization than just bins. And what we have at our disposal is something called folders. And a folder is a way of us organizing, for instance, all of our files, like if our dailies came in separated from our actual clips, like our scenes, because our dailies are just the raw files. We might want to break those into individual scenes. So we might have a folder for the dailies and have a separate folder for scene cuts, the way that we organize our footage. A folder is just an organizing tool within the bin container window. So you'll notice here, the folder by default is untitled. May I just say that you never want to leave anything untitled. Whenever you create anything new in Avid, it uses the word untitled. When you're working by yourself in an environment where there's no one else, that's fine. But the problem is the minute you go and work with other people, untitled starts to build up very quickly and you lose track of what you're actually working on. So even when you're working by yourself, I try to get in the habit of always labeling everything, just because it's good practice. And it's something, one of those things that if you don't practice, like, you know how when you buy a new guitar, you have to practice putting it on the wall and taking care of it so that it doesn't get dinged or binged up. Or if you buy a new piece of hardware or a new toy, you have to take care of that toy. Well, it's the same way with Media Composer or any Avid or any editing application. When you're working with media, the better you label your media, the easier it is for you to find it later. If I want to come back in 2 years and re-edit this project, Avid gives me amazing tools to re-access my media. But if I named it Untitled something, then finding that media might be very difficult, not from Avid's perspective, but from your perspective. So I'm going to relabel this Untitled folder Rushes. And you'll notice when we have a folder, if I have this little triangle to the left, there's nothing in my folder. If I zoom in, you can see that it actually shows you an open and closed icon. And I can grab my titles and my rock climber bin and my music, and I can drag it into a folder. So now notice that all of my clips are hidden away within a folder. And my sequence is on the root level of the bin container window. This is one way we're able to organize our project within Media Composer, which can become very cumbersome when you're talking about feature film or scripted TV or non-scripted TV. Even with corporate video, your projects can become very large. So organizing those projects using bins and folders is a very powerful tool. Again, to get a bin out of a folder, just drag it out of the folder. Literally drag it above the folder and the bin no longer will be in that folder. To get a bin back in that folder, and we do actually want the bins in this folder, it's actually part of the exercise, is we're organizing our project a little bit here. Drag your bins back into the folder. All right, now on page 29, we're gonna get into organizing our clips, which is gonna require us to open up the Rock Climber bin, which has all of our clips. Uh-oh. And I think I just deleted the wrong bin. Oh, that is a perfect example of what happens when you delete the wrong bin. So I'm actually going to we're going to jump ahead for a second because I accidentally deleted the bin I needed. And we're going to talk a little bit about the attic. Now, this is actually going to be talked about later, I think tomorrow. But because I made a mistake, I'm going to actually jump into there a little bit sooner. The attic is essentially this amazing tool that Avid builds automatically into your system where it backs up all of your bins automatically every 15 minutes based on our settings that we talked about earlier. Remember our autosave intervals? And so there is my Rock Climber bin that I accidentally deleted by default. Now notice it's made 15 versions of them because as we talked about earlier in module 1, our autosave gives us how many copies of the bin you want to save back up before it overwrites other copies of it, and how quickly do you want to keep saving it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to option drag the latest copy, Rock Climber clips, to my desktop, and then I'm going to move them to my project that I'm currently working in. So I can just grab this Rock Climber clips and drag it into my project. And right then and there, bada boom, bada bing. Oops, I might have to close this project. And then reopen. There it is at the top. So there's our Rock Climber bin that I accidentally deleted. Now, Matt and Levi, we're going to actually cover this thoroughly later on in the class, what I just did. I literally deleted the wrong bin. So that's the reason why I'm in here, cleaning it up. I was moving a little too fast for my own good. So I'm going to move that bin, and I'm going to get rid of this extra bin that I created, which was the Rock Climber bin. These names are so close that it can get confusing which bin you have selected. So this time I'm going to take my time, make sure I see it, select the right bin. Now, this is another reason why it's good not to empty the trash, by the way. Remember how I said Avid doesn't want you to delete things because you can delete the wrong thing by accident. So I usually wait 24 hours. That's my personal opinion, that when I put something in a trash can inside of Avid Media Composer, I will typically wait 24 hours because it's not hurting the system just sitting there, and you never know. Did I grab the wrong thing? Did I delete the wrong thing? That trash can isn't going to hurt you if it's just there. And then tomorrow morning when I come back into work, I can empty that trash can. But what we want to do is on top of page 29, we want to open up our Rock Climber clips bin. the one I just brought back in. It should be the default bin that was there when you first launched the project. And we want to kind of take a look at icons to identify what clips are. Now we're in text view, and in text view, you'll notice that the clips have a very unique icon. Now notice these little things right here. These are a movie clip. Now this is basically a clip with picture. It could also have audio, but it doesn't necessarily have audio. So when we see this icon, this means it has picture. And if you look at that icon, it's supposed to be one piece of film. You see the little hole punch outs at the top, the little key codes actually right there. So there is our each clip of film. This is what an audio only file looks like. Notice that the audio only has a waveform icon. This is indicating to me that there is no picture associated with this clip. Now, again, gentlemen and ladies, this is only if I'm working in text view. If I'm working in frame view, what you're going to see instead is you're going to actually see picture, or as you just saw a second ago, you're going to see audio waveforms, big audio waveforms. So these icons don't really change that much when you're in text view versus frame view. It's just the size of the icon. Now, one of the things we also want to take a look at is our sequences, which I'm going to open up that bin. And I'm going to go into frame view so that you can see a sequence is essentially frames and audio strung together or edited together. And you notice the sequence icon is essentially a bunch of frames or film strip. So that is what the sequence icon looks like when we're working within Media Composer. So what we're going to do in this exercise on page 29 is we're just going to move the audio out of this clip. So here are my 3 audio files. I don't see any other audio files located here. I can shift select between the 3, or I can individually grab each one. And there's a couple of different ways you can move it. Now, we talked about earlier separating out the bin container file. Remember how we talked about you can grab this window, the rock climber window. I don't want it to snap. I want it to open up in its own self-contained window. I hold it over the bin container window and it pops open on its own. Remember, one more time, I don't want it to snap. I don't want it to snap. I don't want it to be part of this tab. I want it to be its own individual window. So I can drag it over to the bin container window and it will pop open on its own. Or I can right click on this bin and choose open selected in one window, which will do the same thing. But let me show you a little trick. You can also just grab the clip from one bin and drag it to the tab, and it will drag over that way as well. Again, grab the clip and just drag it to the tab you want. Notice titles, sequences. If I leave it over the tab for 1 second, notice it highlights. I can, of course, grab this bin, create its own separate floating window if I hold it over the bin container window, and then move the audio file that way. Now I have the 2 bins side by side. I could also snap the bin into side by side so that they're literally side by side. Oops, let me just get rid of that bin container window so we don't see it. But I find it to be a little cumbersome when the system literally allows you to drag and drop from one window to another. So one more time, I'm just going to show you. And you open up your rock climber window and it opens up in the tab. You can literally drag and drop to any tab within the window and that tab becomes highlighted. It allows you just to keep your interface a little cleaner. But if you're somebody who likes to work with floating windows, then by all means, we'll use floating windows. I do not want to tell you how to work. I want to just give you options and then point out the benefits of some of those options. And the benefit here is the obvious benefit. I'm currently editing on one monitor, so desktop real estate is of a sacred resource. So I want to be as organized on my desktop within the application as possible. So that's one reason I'm working with tabs and snapping a lot more. But maybe you have the luxury of 2, 3, or 4 monitors. I don't know why you would have 4, but I have seen people set up with 3 monitors. That's just a lot of desktop real estate to cover, but you might want to spread your bins out if you have that option. So there are reasons for why working in tab view is better. Obviously, in a one monitor environment, if you're working mobilely, this view is much faster and quicker to work with in the system. But if you have that desktop real estate, you might want to spread everything out and have your bins in separate windows, all of them. And notice here, I can have all my bins floating independently, just like in older versions of Media Composer. All right. Any questions about that? I'm going to jump over to page 30, and it talks about deleting media. Now, I'm going to jump ahead in this step, especially for Matt and Levi, if you are following along. And if I can't see the comments, let me just stop sharing for a second and see if there's any comments. No new comments. All right. All right. So if you're following along with us here, one of the things we're going to talk about on page 30 is deleting media. Please don't delete any media. Just what we're going to do is show you what it looks like to delete media. But if you look at the book on page 30, step number 27, what does it say there? I'm going to read it out loud. Do not click OK. In other words, we're going to be taking a look at what deleting looks like here, because we want this media for later. When I go to delete a clip, notice that we get this option for a master clip and 2 media files. This is something we're going to talk about in the next module. But essentially, like a library, there's a pointer file, and that pointer file is going to point us to the actual big media files. Within our project, we are working with the master clips. These master clips are pointing to the physical media on our hard drive. So what that means is, if I delete the master clip and leave the media, I can force Avid to rescan the media, and it will create new master clips for me. If I delete the media and not the master clip, then I still have all that pointer information, and I can basically tell Avid to recapture the media based on the statistical information the master clip has, i.e. what tape it came from, what hard drive it came from, what volume it's on, and where it's located. If you delete both, you delete it all. It's gone. Now, I just showed you that we have something called an attic, and Avid has got your back, meaning Avid is backing up everything for you all the time. But just keep in mind, when you delete both, you're essentially telling Avid, get rid of everything. Now, take a look at a sequence. When I go to delete a sequence, there is no option to delete media. Why? Because a sequence is essentially multiple media clips strung together. So all a sequence is pointers, pointing files back to the master clips. You can delete the sequence all you want, but it will never delete any media associated with it, because all media originates as a clip. All right, I'm going to move on from that little section. Again, I'm just talking about deleting. We're going to get deeper into it in the book tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as well. But I want to also get into the exercise aspect in the book on page 31. It talks about customizing workspaces. This is actually a really cool little section. So to customize workspaces, first let's open up a couple of tools, and let's start with the audio tool first. As I mentioned earlier, tools snap with tools while bins snap with bins. If you move your tool around the window, if you grab it by that little purple handle and move it, it's going to tell you where it could snap. And how is it telling me that? By those green indicators. You see them? Those green markers are telling me where I can snap the audio tool. So really, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locations that I can snap this tool. Do you like it down there? Do you like it up here? Do you like it over here to the right out of the way? Whatever your preference. A lot of people typically have an edit monitor connected, so their source record composer windows are usually smaller because they'll have a broadcast monitor connected to their I/O box. But you might want your source record windows larger, and so you might want to move your audio tool to the timeline. But maybe you want a bigger timeline, so you want to move your audio tool up here at the top next to your bin container windows. Again, it's up to you to decide where you want them and where you want to place it. But remember, once you place it, it is not part of the workspace. It's a modification to the workspace. So in order to save that modification, and I'm going to place it down here, so it's a little bit better place. In order to save that modification, I have to go to that workspace, which is currently selected. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm in the color workspace and I make a change, like I add the audio tool and I want to snap it somewhere, you first got to go into the workspace that you want to make it permanent part of. So the first thing you want to do, you can have the audio tool open up for color correction, but it doesn't really make sense since you're working with individual pictures versus the audio. So I'm going to close the audio tool when I'm in the color correction section. I'm going to go back to the edit workspace. And now when I open up my audio tool and I snap it to wherever I want to snap it, everybody choose a location. Again, those green markers are telling you where they snap. Now I have the option, if I click that little arrow, to save current, which will save your default, your modifications to your workspaces as your default new workspace. I actually think this is a very cool feature. So again, one more thing, two things I use all the time is the audio mixer and the audio tool, right? The audio mixer I'm always using to make changes to audio levels in my clips. And the audio tool I'm always using just to make sure that I'm not going over peak levels of my calibration. I'm going to resize these windows so they take up less room. Do a little modification again. We're in exercise 1, page number 32, 33. And I'm going to go ahead and say save current. Oops. Now what I did there is instead of hitting save current is I hit the button and notice my audio mixer went away. I was not as elegant as it needed to be. So we're going to try that one more time. I'm going to drag the audio mixer down here, resize those windows. And then we're going to, of course, choose save current. Now, this is my default editorial interface with an audio mixer opened up and the audio tool already located in the timeline. Does that make sense for everybody at page 33? And then the last thing it has you do on page 34 is set the autosave. And if you remember, autosave is under settings. And with settings, autosave is going to be part of the bin setting. And there is our autosave. Remember how I just used the autosave? Now, because we're in the attic, I do want to take a second and talk about maximum files in a project attic is 1,000. Maximum versions of a file in the attic, 50. That means it will make 50 versions of your bin and not overwrite version 1 of the bin until it gets to 51. Then version 1 will go away. And version 2 will go away with 52, and version 3 will go away with 53. So it will say 50 iterations of that bin, if that's what you want. I've had it set to 100 for certain projects, but this was a long time ago. I usually don't need to change that setting. 50 to me is more than enough, but everybody has a reason to change it, depending on your workflow. There are people who have been worked on sequences and wanted to be able to go further back in time. And so they might set it to 200, and that gives them more options, more bins to go back to earlier in time, if that makes sense. All right, so with that said, it's going to take us to the next module. We have just completed module 1, exercise 1. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second here and see, is there any questions here? Matt, Levi, are you guys good? Do you guys have any questions, sir? Yes, all right, cool. All right, so I'm just making sure, checking in. This is a new world and expectations. Sometimes it can be a different when there's a teacher online versus in person, but the information, I swear to you, is the same. So we're going to get into module 2, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And in module 2, our goal is basically to create a new project, use the source browser to locate camera files, import. So what we're basically going to do in this module is bring media in and organize our bin. Now, in order to do that, the first thing I need to do is I need to close this project, and we're going to close this project we're going to start up on page 36, if you would, Matt and Levi. And so we're going to basically go into private shared. We're going to talk about our project options, first of all. Now, on the bottom of 36, it basically mentions private projects are saved on the document folder of the OS user. This is going to be different depending on if you're a Mac or PC. But notice, for instance, private it's going to show me the path right underneath. Where should the private projects be? Now, let me explain the difference between private and shared. These are default locations that Avid adds to your system no matter what you do. If you go to USC or if you go to NYU, you're always going to have a local private directory and a local shared directory. That means is if I log into the computer as Jay Amile, and I want my projects, I don't want anyone else who uses this computer. This is a shared computer at, let's say, a college. I might store my projects under private. If I store them under shared, that means every user who logs into this machine will see your projects. Now, again, I noticed that Matt and Levi were on different OSs, and one way you can figure out where do your projects need to go is right here. You can see how for shared, for instance, it's the user shared. Now, this is, of course, is a Mac system, but on a PC, it would give you the same path for your PC. I want to talk about external for a second because it's more than likely the option you're going to use in the field. External is basically telling Avid, my projects do not reside in your default locations. My projects reside somewhere else, whether it's on a shared storage network like Nexus, or it's on a project server or another computer. External means my projects are not in a default location. What I need you to do is I need to tell you what that location is. So notice there's no path here. If my projects are external, I need to tell it where the path is, which means I'm gonna click that little folder button. It's gonna open up a path directory and ask me, where are your projects located? Now, if I have a third-party hard drive located, or I'm part of the network, let's say I wanna connect to I have a Mac Pro in the other room, I can connect to that machine. Maybe my projects are located there. The point of this is when you choose external, and then you define the location of that projects, the external option remembers the path. If you choose shared or private and then browse to an external project, the next time you launch Media Composer, it's going to default back to private or the shared directory that Avid internally has. But if you leave it on external and then browse to the folder that you're looking for instance, I want this project, it's going to know where to find it. And it's going to know next time when you launch the software where it's located. So external is really good for when, for instance, you're working with shared projects. Oops, I'm just going to close this project. I didn't need to use this project. External is excellent for when you're working with shared projects on like a Nexus or an ISIS, and your projects are located on the Nexus or ISIS workspace. Well, you would choose external, you'll browse to that project, and you'll choose wherever that project is, depending on the network. And the best part about this is Avid will remember that location next time we launch the software. So that's the whole point of shared projects. Now, what we're actually going to do is we're going to create a new project. And to create a new project, what we're going to do is we're going to choose the new project button here in the project window selection option. So I'm going to zoom in here for a second. And before we go any deeper, I want to mention a couple of things about the project where Avid's a little bit different than every other system out there. Within the project world, Avid treats the project as a container, as a folder. When we go to the desktop level and we look at our projects, let me see here. I'm going to open up the folder and edit 6. Sorry, just get to our shared project folder directory. I want you to be able to see these projects that I'm talking about. Now, I'm inside my project now on the root level of the desktop. Now, you don't necessarily need to follow me there, but I want to show you what I'm looking at. You notice here we see our rock climbing project setting AVP, and we have our sequence bin, and then there's that rushes folder where our music file is. So literally, this is a physical representation of what we're seeing in Media Composer in the project. But the key to remember here is in Media Composer, The sequence is not the project. The sequence is located within a sequence bin. The project is the project in Media Composer. And projects are compatible along project format lines, meaning you can't easily go from PAL to NTSC. Of course you can go, there are ways to cross convert media files within Avid, but in a project world, if you create a project and it's the wrong frame rate, for instance, if you were supposed to be 2398 and you chose 5994 and you need to correct that, your workaround is create a new project. There is no way to correct a project after it's created. So it is critical that you find out from your production staff or whoever you're working with what the project setting should be, because this is a setting that is very difficult to change after it's set. I used to kid and joke that your project is kind of like God. This setting is the main setting for your window. So when you're creating your windows, you want to keep that in mind, that your project window, where we want to give it a name. Let's say we're going to call this for right now jacuzzi. And then we have a format setting, which is essentially what is the aspect ratio frame rate. Notice here 2K Ultra HD NTSC, which is standard definition. I would say the most common frame rate today in scripted offline editorial and feature film would be 2397 1080p 23976. And this is for offline editorial, but a lot of people out there are not offline in editorial. And so you might have a different, you might want to work at 2K. Now, let me point out, the bigger the file that you're working with, the more powerful the computer needs to be, the more powerful the storage needs to be. So that's why a lot of people work with HD. So, you know, I'm currently on an iMac 5K, and this machine could probably edit a lot of decent material, but it's not going to cut a 2.5-hour feature film for me at 2K. I'm going to want a new Mac Pro, the new cheese graters that are available, and I'm going to want a little bit more horsepower behind that. Now, in the book, it mentions when you start your project, we're going to go ahead and start ours with a 1080 2390, which is actually what it says on page 37 right there. And actually, I don't want to call this one jacuzzi. I'm just going to call this test project. Always give your project a name. And later on, just so you guys know, we will be covering a couple of other tidbits of information, but notice here, we do have the ability to change and do custom and create custom raster sizes, custom frame rates, and custom color spaces. We're just going to keep it simple for now and not go through all that complexity, but you can still change the color space, and you can turn on a feature called stereoscopic, which is basically the 3D editorial feature, which is not really as popular anymore today, but was very popular at one time. All right, so I'm flipping over to page 38, and it's, page 38, and I'm just gonna hit OK. And I'm gonna go back into my rock climbing project for now, because we're actually going to, as part of this exercise, we're going to be importing some media and some clips into a new project later on, Matt and Levi. That's for the jacuzzi project that's on the desktop, hopefully for both of you. It is designed so that we can literally create it from scratch in the next exercise. All right, so on the bottom of page 38, it just talks about the project dynamic window. I want to take a second because that's a big one here. And oops, stop sharing for a second. And I just want to make sure, is everyone all good with projects? Everyone understand the concept of projects are important to set up correctly at the beginning. If they're not set up correctly at the beginning, you could have a problem later on. And the only way to fix that is to create a new project. I have seen assistant editors get fired for setting up a project incorrectly because a lot of times they don't discover it to the end. One of the rules, if you are an assistant editor or working on big projects, one of the things I like to recommend is after I set up my project on that first day, I usually do a test output and confirm with the people who I'm working with that everything worked okay. And that makes sure that if I screw up, I only screw up 1 day of work and I'm not screwing up 30 days of work. So I can tell you when I worked for Avid in 1998, I was in tech support for about 3 months. And I remember a person who tried to make a cut list and they discovered none of their cut list, which is the file you create with the old film format, that none of the files would export. And they didn't discover this till day 48 of editorial, which was a shame because they had to go back and make many, many changes. So it's always good if you're working on a big project or you're working on any kind of project where you feel like there's any type of heat behind you. If you screw up, that there could be problems, then do testing. Test your project out when you create the project. Test it out immediately. Export files, send them to the audio house, send them to the video house. Make sure everybody can see everything and make sure everybody's communicating properly, because you don't want to find out on the last day of editorial that things were set up incorrectly. All right. On page 39, it talks about setting up your project, which we've kind of done a little bit. The first thing it talks about is creating new bins, which we did in the last exercise. Again, we can create a new bin from the fast menu. We can create a new bin from the file menu. New bin there's an option right there. So let's go ahead and create a new bin. I'm going to go ahead and create a new bin for capturing some media. And of course, it looks like I have 2 new bins. So I'm going to get rid of one of these new bins. Remember, it's in the trash can, so it's not permanently deleted. I can always drag it out of the trash can and bring it back. All right, I don't need it again, so it goes right back into the trash can. But that trash can, again, I like to leave it there for usually a little while before I empty it, just in case I need it. And let's go ahead and label this. This is going to be source clips. We're going to call this bin. All right. Now, when you're working with your bin, on the bottom of page 39, as I keep saying, you want to make sure you label your bins. Don't call it stuff, more stuff, and then some more stuff on top of that. Because in a year, and I have made money on projects where I cut this project for a lighting company, and then each year they came back to me and asked for updates. Now, ironically, the first year I cut that video, it took forever. And I didn't make that much money. If you did per hour breakdown, I maybe, made very little money, maybe $10 per hour. But every year that they came back, because I had organized the project so well, it was 10 minutes of work for me to add 4 new shots, and my rates were still the same. And so over the average of 10 years, my hourly rate went from really bad because I had to edit a 10-minute video to really amazing because I only had to make changes each year depending on new personality, based on labeling and organizing my clips in the bin. So I'm not even thinking about that you're gonna use this project today. I'm thinking about that you're gonna work on a film, close that film for 6 months, then have to reopen up that film and find files that you can't find anymore because you didn't label them properly. Labeling is everything when it comes to working with complex programs like Avid Media Composer or any editing application. The more time we put into the input of the material, the more we'll get out of that material, if that makes sense. The more time we get into labeling, organizing, the easier it will be for us to interact with the system and find what we're looking for at any point. All right, so on page 40, it talks about opening up bins, and there's a couple of tips here that we can open up a bin and close the bin a couple of different ways. We can open up a bin by double clicking the bin, and if you look at the icon, this is what an open bin looks like. It literally looks like a folder that's been pulled open of a filing cabinet. And you can see when it's closed, it looks like it's been pushed back into the filing cabinet. Oops, sorry, let me close the clip. And it looks like it's been pushed back into the filing cabinet. So it gives you pretty good icons of what you're looking for. If you want, you can select and open up 2 bins or multiple bins at once. Open selected bins, or I can just double click them both, shift select both of them. The system is pretty flexible, and I can close multiple bins at once. Go to the fast menu, and I have the option to close selected bins. So you can open and close many bins quickly and easily. On page 41, it talks about deleting bins, which we've gone into a little bit already with deleting bins. Remember, once you delete the bin, the bin is not gone. You have to empty the trash. The system by default will not want you to empty the trash. It says don't empty. You have to specifically choose empty the trash. Now, at that same note, you've seen me in this course of this class make a mistake and delete the wrong bin. So you can see why emptying the trash may not be something you want to do right away. You might want to just wait till the end of the day and verify that you have everything you, because once it's in the trash, it's not accessible. But it doesn't mean you need to actually delete it. It can be the last thing you do in the day before you head home. Because if you've been working without it for the whole day, then you probably don't need it anymore. All right. On page 42, it gets into the bin snapping functionality again. And so what I'd like to do is kind of go through this one more time because it is a really complicated concept. With bins, one more time, remember, bins only interact with other bins and snap to other bins. So if I double click on this bin here, notice by default, when I open a bin, it opens up in a tab. Everyone seeing that? When I close the bin, if I want the bin to snap, I have to pull it, and then it's showing me where I can snap to. Now notice, I'm not snapping anywhere over here on my left or my right. It's snapping only to bins. Bins only interact with other bins. If I want the bin to not snap to anything, and I want it in an independent floating window, merely drag the bin to the bin container window, and you'll get a pop-up. So one more time, opening up a bin by default is in tab view. If we want our bin side by side, we could snap it, and you notice the green shows us. If we want our bin in an independent window, we just grab it, and instead of snapping it, we just drag it to the bin container window, and it floats. And that is our bin. Now, if you're in the book, and I'm assuming Matt and Levi are following along in the book on page 42. On page 43, it shows you essentially, oops, let me just get back in the media composer here. It shows you what I like to call the bin display option at the top. Basically, what it's talking to you about are all the icons for what every clip in the bin looks like. Now, we were talking about a master clip earlier. We talked about sequences earlier. We saw what the little icon looked like. And we talked about music, which funny enough is not located in this little option, but music is the waveform. But there's also things called link media and subclips and effects. So we're going to get different icons depending on what type of media that we're working with. Now, on the bottom of page 43, it talks about importing video and audio clips. And it basically gets into the 3 different ways to bring media into the system. And we're going to go ahead and do this, then take a 2-minute break and let everyone use the bathroom or anything else like that once we're done with explaining the inputting the media, which will be at the end of this page. We'll be gone for about 2 hours at this point too, Matt and Levi, and just give you a second to stretch your legs, stand up, and then we'll come back in and finish out this module for today and the exercise. All right, so on the bottom of page 43, it talks about the 3 ways of bringing media into the system. Way number 1, which when I started out, which I don't want to tell you what year that was, but the primary way of inputting media when I was a young editor was tape. Tape. Actually, when I started out, it was linear editing, and Avid was a special tool. It was not as widely used today. But today, tape is pretty much dead because of, well, you can blame it on the earthquake in Japan that took place a couple of years ago, but essentially when that earthquake took place, it killed the factories that made the HD Cam SR tapes that we used in Hollywood. And we very quickly moved from a tape delivery format to a tapeless format. So today we typically work with tapeless media, and there are 2 ways to bring in tapeless media. There's linking and importing. Linking connects to an original file in the media composer. So essentially, linking allows us to work with the native media from the camera. Importing converts the media to an Avid Media native file, which is in a predefined location, and converts it to a native Avid file, which is optimized for post-production workflow. Now, I know this is a little complicated. I'm actually going to take off this stream here because this is something we can just lecture about. When we get into cameras versus editorial formats, you have to think about what is the intent of the manufacturer behind the device that they've made. Meaning, when I buy a RED camera, the intent of the RED manufacturer is to give you the most picture-perfect acquisition format possible, or the Arri camera or the Sony camera. It doesn't matter the camera. Those codecs are designed for acquisition. When we're working within an editorial environment, there are going to be codecs designed for post-production, like ProRes, DNX HD, and DNX HR. These are what we call transport protocol codecs. I won't get into the nerdiness of how they work, but essentially working with Avid native media is optimized to work with computers, to work with hard drives, to move along the post-production pipeline. Working with camera files can work and does work in most cases, but sometimes those files aren't optimized for the post-production pipeline, meaning if you're working with shared storage, those files could clog the shared storage. You might need a bigger connection. So a lot of times in the, and I'm going to use this term loosely, in the professional role of editorial, and what I mean by that is in scripted TV or non-scripted TV, a lot of times they will take the camera file and convert it to an Avid editable file. They'll do two things in that process. One, they'll convert it to a smaller version of the file, meaning the acquisition was 4K, but we're going to work with an offline editorial file that's HD, because we don't need to take up the hard drive space of 4K for editorial. And sorry about that, there was a motorcycle driving by. We don't need to edit in 4K to create our sequence. We just need to conform in 4K at the end of it. And then the second thing is speed. Not as just storage, because remember, those Arri files and those RED files, they're gigantic. They take up a ton of hard drive space compared to the DNX files and the ProRes files, which are optimized for hard drives, meaning they take up typically less space, and usually they expand and contract when you're playing them back within the timeline without getting too nerdy. They're designed, they're optimized for the post-production workflow. So when we work with linking versus importing media, these are the things we keep in mind. A lot of times we'll link to media and then we'll convert it to an Avid format, or instead we'll, from the get-go, we'll import the media, which will turn it into an Avid format from the get-go. All right, so it is 3:21. I wanted to just take a quick 2-minute break. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen with you guys, just so you can see we're on break for 2 minutes. And I'm just going to leave our website up. Matt, Levi, why don't you go and basically just stretch your legs? And what we'll do is we'll start back up at 3:25. So I just want to make sure you guys are there. All right, I'm going to give a couple more minutes to Matt and Levi to just relax for a second, take a quick break since we've been going for 2 hours. And then we're going to jump right into page number 44 when you guys are, I'll let you know. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes. Relax.
Hey, Jonathan. Looks like there's a way for us to allow them to talk. And so, Levy and Matt, if you are interested, we can click an allow to talk button, and then you can control your.
All right, is Matt and Levi back? Are we feeling good about ready to start back up again? I'm just gonna wait till I get all goods from both of you. Okay, I see yeses from at least Matt. So we're gonna go ahead and jump back into the software if everyone feels comfortable. And what we're gonna do now on page 44 is we're gonna get into actually bringing some media into the system. Now, in order to bring in media, we're gonna use something called the source browser. And to locate the source browser, we're gonna go File, Input, and there's our option right there, the source browser. This is gonna be our primary tool to AMA or link media into the system. AMA is the Avid Media Access term. That was the original terminology for linking to media. So some of you might still use the term AMA. I'm gonna make this window a little bit larger. Now the source browser came out in version 8.6. So if you're using an older version of Avid, like 8, I don't know anyone on 8.6, older than 8.6 actually. But if you are on an older version, this will look more like just an open window. And 8.6 and above, they redesigned this window so that it would be more efficient for media. You'll notice it's broken into a couple of different panels. Up here at the top left-hand corner is our navigation section for the window. Over here is our volume view. How are we looking at the window? And then down here is our options. Are we linking or are we importing the media? If we're linking, what are the options behind the linking? Volume linking, linking options, versus if we're importing, we're going to get different options. Notice that important, it's going to have image size conversion. What are you converting? Remember, because when you're importing, what are you doing? You're creating a new media file. When you're linking, all you're doing is creating a master clip that points to the media file. If that makes sense to everybody. Again, when you're linking, we're actually playing back the original media. When we're importing, we're creating new media and using it within the Avid organized media file structure. So what we want to do is obviously we want to link for right now. And if everyone was able to follow instructions on their desktop, they should have the jacuzzi file. Oops, I went too far. So on everyone's desktop, you should see the jacuzzi. And within that jacuzzi file, you'll notice here that in the lower, or at the top, let me first of all open up a clip here. You can see that we can see our files down here as either text view or clip view, just like our bins. So I can choose to make them like pictures or like text files. This is one of those situations where I actually like looking at it in text view. And I can make them larger, remember, and smaller. We have our little blow up arrow down here, zoom, make these files larger or smaller so that we can see what we're looking at. And you'll notice when we're in frame view, it's really easy to see what we want. You can actually
put it back on, genius.
Play on your keys. Now, the frame keys are one set of keys, but I'm going to jump ahead of myself for a second because this is a universal, depending, no matter what software you're using. And that is the JKL keys. Now, gentlemen and everyone on the internet, Facebook or beyond, we are going to cover this officially in the book in actually 3 pages or 4 pages, but JKL are essentially ways to move media in every application. The L key, and this doesn't matter if it's DaVinci Resolve or Premiere or Final Cut Pro or Avid or even Cinedeck. These random programs, anything that controls media typically has the JKL functionality built into it. Now, again, we're going to go into deeper detail what is the JKL functionality. And notice I can scroll a little bit through the clip with my mouse, kind of like you do with Final Cut and iMovie, but you can also play the clip.
No, we'll have to go all the way back to the warehouse.
And peak hour traffic.
I know. It's the semis, Ivan.
Just like
we'll
as
miss
if you were in a
kickoff.
bit.
Listen, if the man doesn't want it, he doesn't have to take it.
Now, on the bottom of page 45, or on the top of page 45, it talks about looking at your clips in volume view versus media view. This view up here at the top, it's really hard to show you the difference when we're not working on a red file. But basically what this will do, and you could, if you take a look at the book, Matt and Levi, you can see the difference in how it looks at certain types of volumes. We're dealing with QuickTime movies, so these are kind of easy for it to understand. But when you deal with a red file, each file is stored in an individual folder, and sometimes you have to click down to each folder to find those files. So if you notice on page 1 or page 45, it shows you an example of the difference between media view and volume view. Now, by default, it's in volume view, and my humble opinion would be to leave it in volume view unless you have a reason to change it, which usually is very specific. Otherwise, I would leave it in the way it was left. And then the next step on page 46 is adding clips to your bin. Now, here's the thing. Once you find the clips you want to work with, right? You want to make sure, we're gonna just play here for a little bit and not make it too complicated. So I'm going to go to the Jacuzzi 06 folder, and I'm just going to link 2 files, these 2 files. I'm going to tell it, and I'm going to make my link source browser window a little smaller so we can zoom in and see everything at once. I'm going to tell it that it's going to go to the new source clip bin. Remember, I made a new bin earlier, right before the break, and that's where I'm going to have the clips go. And for right now, we're going to choose link. We are not going to choose import. Remember, import creates all new media. We're going to choose link. So when I go to link these 2 clips and I choose link, notice those 2 clips immediately appear. First of all, the source browser window doesn't close because it's an active tool, kind of like the Adobe Bridge tool. You could still be linking more media. But if I look at my bin, there's the 2 clips. More importantly, the clips play back. I'm going to close the source browser window for now. The clips play back just fine. They play also back in frame view. I can make these larger. This would be an instance where I would want to change the individual start frame.
Delivery! Delivery!
So that I get a better representation of what those clips are in the bin. Remember from module 1, we talked about changing the head frame in frame view versus text view. Just wanted to go back. But the key thing here I want to point out, everyone, is that when you link files, you get this new icon. You see that icon? If a file is not linked, notice how when I'm in frame view, none of these have that little linked icon. That means these clips are part of the Avid Media File native structure, that they're in the Avid Media File folder. But when I link my clips, notice I get these little icons. That's telling me it's not part of the Avid native media file folder, and that the media itself is residing in different locations depending on where you pulled it from. Now, the upside and downside to linking is if you hook up a hard drive and link and you get all the media into the system, well, what happens if someone pulls that hard drive away? That is your biggest worry, because now that media won't be available to you anymore. Even though the master clips will still be there, it won't have access to the hard drive. When you force it to use the Avid media file structure, it's typically using a known storage system that your editorial system has permanently connected. But again, linking is extremely powerful, and I'm not saying not to use it. I'm just saying what can be the downsides of using linking if you move the hard drive you can lose the location. But I would actually say linking is the #1 way people bring media into the system. Now, it points out on the bottom of page 47, understanding camera native, which we kind of talked about a little bit before the break. Again, the camera native being the red file, the Alexa raw file, the raw files that if you're working on a feature film or TV show, standard workflow is they shoot the feature film, then they bring it to a facility where they convert the media to an editorial format, and then they give it to the editors. A standard workflow for non-scripted TV, where they don't have as big a budget sometimes, is they typically do that conversion within editorial and not use a separate facility to take these big 4K files. But a lot of times in non-scripted reality TV, they're not shooting 4K or 6K or 8K. They're typically shooting at the format that they're delivering at, versus in feature film and in scripted TV, they're typically shooting at a future-proof format, a format that will allow them to continue to make money off their show in 20 years. Something to think about that I always bring up to my students is I Love Lucy was shot in 1955, and it's still making money for CBS, still making money 75 years later. So content is king, and being able to track, control, and modify that content is obviously very important. All right, so I'm going to flip over to page 48, where we can get into importing media versus linking media. And I'm actually going to do this with the same media file so that you guys can see the difference. Now, when we linked the media, it was instantaneous, because remember, it's not creating any new media. It's just creating pointer files to the media that already exists. But if we choose to import the media, now it's creating media. Notice when I go from linking to importing, we get two new options down here at the bottom. The first option is, what resolution do you want the media to be at? By default, it's DNX HD 60, and we're going to leave it there for right now. But you'll notice when I click on this, I have a lot of options. For today, we're not going to go into those options, but believe me, these options are useful to know, and you can Google them. And then the second question is going to be, where do you want to import this media to? Now, notice the audio and video drive are all going to go to my internal hard drive, because I don't have another hard drive hooked up. I'm not on Nexus. I'm currently at home, and I don't have my home computers networked on a Nexus because I'm not cutting a feature film, or I'm not doing anything crazy enough to require me to put in a whole shared storage solution in my condo. But some of you may have separate locations for audio than video. And in the old days of editorial, way back in the days when I first started out, Avid used to recommend that you would put your audio and video on separate drives for optimization. Today, that's not a problem because drives are super fast. All right, so let's get back to importing. Now, when we go to import, I want to take a look at one of the options. And the option I want to take a look at, remember, options are located with a little gear window for both link and import. They just change depending on what you have selected. For import, what we're going to take a look at is our image size. And a couple of years ago, Avid renamed these, so it's a little bit easier. But for basic understanding, what this means is the first option means everything was done right. Wherever the file came from, they understood that I'm working in a 1080 project. This last option here says that I have no idea where this file came from. This file came from the internet and is probably not 1080, but is probably maybe 240 by 120. What this will do is force it to the aspect ratio that you're currently working in, or do not resize it and leave it as a small image. So you've got a couple of different options. I would say the only one that you're really not going to worry about anymore is crop pad for DV scan lines. And that was the old DVD options, if you remember, were 720 by 480 versus NTSC options, which were 720 by 486. So it pad 2 lines at the top and 4 lines at the bottom. None of that's going to be necessarily relevant today because we typically don't work with that resolution, or DVDs, to be honest. And then the last thing I want to point out is there is an alpha channel. Now, we all understand that there are 3 primary channels when dealing with color: red, green, and blue. And then there are 3 secondary colors. But there's also something known as an alpha channel, which determines what is opaque and what is transparent, what is see-through and what is not see. And so what this basically does is it allows you to invert the alpha channel if it was done in a program where it had a different standard for black versus white. Avid and other applications, the alpha channel may be different depending from Final Cut to Resolve to Premiere, meaning what I'm getting at is in Resolve, it might mean where here it says white is opaque, Resolve might be black is opaque. And so we have the ability to invert the alpha channel if the alpha channel is made in reverse. How do we know that it's made in reverse? You'll know the minute it's brought in, because everything that you want to see will be hidden and everything that you don't want to see will not be hidden. But again, all I wanted to do was just go over these options. Now, the last option here is scale for range. And this is basically your 709 color space that we're dealing with, your 0 to 255 IRE. By default, we leave it scaled to legal range, and that keeps us within broadcast 709 color space. If you're working on a raw color project where this doesn't mean anything to you, we can change this. It's actually discussed in a later book, but these are basically the simple options for when you go to import a file. So now let's go ahead and import the same two files that we linked to. But when I go to import these, gentlemen and ladies, you'll see how much longer it takes, because now it has to create media from scratch versus instantaneously link to the files. Now, they're going to end up in the same bin as my link files. They're going to actually have very similar names, but the icons are going to be different as well. Still importing. You can see it there, still importing. But you can see in my bin that one of the clips imported already, and the second clip will only take another 15 seconds and we'll be done. So when I import versus linking, the two differences, the main differences here is with import, it actually creates new media files that are now part of the Avid media file structure. When you link, these files are not part of the Avid media file structure. They could be anywhere in my environment that this computer can see. And I'm just linking to those files that could be anywhere. Now, hopefully they are not anywhere. They're located in a very specific location, and you have an organization technique for when new files come in, because if they are just located anywhere, you're going to have problems with organization later on. But you can see the difference between the same clips, one versus linked, one versus imported. Do they play back differently?
Delivery!
No.
I see you there, boss. I see you there, boss.
All right, so the next thing it talks about is importing audio media. Audio media can accompany video, or it can be its own little thing. When we go to import audio media, I'm going to go back to the source browser window. And you'll notice there's, in the Jacuzzi folder, there's some music. And when we grab a music file, we can link or import it. As it mentions, when you're linking your audio, you can turn it into a stereo track or a mono track or both. And this option is going to be in both options. Let me point this out to you. If I go to link and I hit my gear option and we go to link options, notice we get this thing called multi-channel audio. And when I go to edit, I can say I want channel A1 and A2 to be stereo, to be 5.1, to be 7.1, etc. So I can choose a drop-down format for how the audio comes into the timeline. If you take a look at my timeline currently, I have 2 mono channels and 1 stereo channel. A stereo channel cannot edit into a mono channel, and a mono channel cannot edit into a stereo channel. So when you do import these files, you do want to think about, am I stereo mono? Because one's going to be able to edit into each other. If I'm doing a combination of the two, you want to make sure at least you are consistent with that combination. So if I go to import the audio, notice my audio options are the same. I go to audio, edit, and I have the option for stereo as well, located there as well. And we can import our audio as stereo clip. So we're going to go ahead and import this audio as a stereo clip. And hopefully everyone set theirs up as stereo. And let's go ahead and just grab this clip and import it. Now, notice it's asking what time code do you want to start at? Because it doesn't have any time code associated with it whatsoever. It's an audio file. What is our project that we started at? If I don't remember what our project is, I can always go to File, Settings, Format, and there's my project setting. So it can be seen across the system, and it can be seen later on if you've forgotten what it is. Hopefully you have not, but you can easily find that information out. All right, so let's go ahead and import that audio, select and import, and we're going to choose 2398 as our frame rate and hit OK to all. And notice when the audio imports what it looks like. It has an audio only icon, and when I drag it into my source window, it's just audio. Now, I want to take a second and highlight the track selector windows here, even though we're not really into editing yet. If you notice down here at the bottom, I have a stereo audio track. Notice my stereo audio track cannot be edited into the mono tracks. It can only be edited into a stereo track. Now, something we haven't gotten into yet, but we're about to in the next couple of pages, is creating new audio tracks within the system. When I go to create a new audio track within our system, you'll notice for audio, we have the ability to create, and again, I'm doing this under the timeline menu, new audio track. Notice I have the ability to create stereo or mono tracks. So I can purposely define what's going to be stereo and what's going to be mono, and how am I going to break out my audio. Typically, for instance, music is very common to bring in a stereo because you know there's always two tracks to music. So instead of having a left-right, you just have one center track, and it makes more sense. But for audio, narration, for the scene audio, typically that's wanted as mono because it gives you more control over the audio, if that makes sense. But again, the workflow may change from shop to shop, from location to location, from project to project. All right, we're on page 51. We're flipping over to page 52, where it talks about importing audio versus linking audio. Again, gentlemen, we already imported audio. This time, let's link the audio to see if there's a difference. Oops, let's go down here. File, inputs. Where is my source browser? 1 second, gentlemen. Just see what happened to my source browser here. I just default to store the current workspace. Not sure what happened there. And there's my source browser. That was weird. But did you notice what I just did there for troubleshooting? And this happens a lot where you're trying to figure out why there's a window open and you can't select something. So that's how I use workspaces, is I very much just default it back to a default interface. If I've made any changes, it takes me 2 seconds to realign those changes. For instance, I think I had the audio tool open up over here, and I had the audio mixer open up over here. But it looked like something was open in the background that was not allowing me to open up my my source browser window. And I'm just going to save current. And now I'm back to where I was 10 seconds ago. All right, so we should have our source browser window open up. And what we are trying to do is, instead of importing the audio, I'm going to link to the audio just so you can see the difference. Link. And there it is. And you'll notice again, the difference really is the fact that it's instantaneous. It doesn't have to import, create new media like we talked about. And the fact that it has this new link icon, which means that the audio does not reside within. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you take a look at your hard drive, and we were looking at this a little bit earlier for the editors, you have a folder called Avid Media Files. This is the Avid structure we're talking about, where it's already organized, it's already set up. There are databases for the system to track this media. Otherwise, I'm currently playing with my Jacuzzi media that's on my desktop. That media could be anywhere. It could be on a hard drive. So it is important when you're understanding linking too, that you want to make sure that there's some level of organization when you're bringing that media in, because if they move those files away, it literally will disappear. All right, so where are we? On page 53, it talks about dragging and dropping media into the system. This is actually kind of cool. So if I want, I can actually drag and drop media from the OS level into, I'm gonna open up the Jacuzzi on the OS level. And if I just grab like tone, for instance, if I drag it into a bin, it's gonna import. Notice the icon? If I Alt or Option drag it into a bin, uh-oh, this might work weird with Zoom. Oh, there it goes. If I Option or Alt drag it into a bin, it's going to link the media. Notice the difference. This is on page 53. So a lot of people like to drag and drop and work within a system that way. And that's a powerful way of working. I definitely don't not knock it, but I usually find the source browser window to be a little bit more organized for me, meaning that when I'm working with the source browser window, I get more control, I get options, I get to see what the resolution is, I'm seeing what the drives are, I'm seeing exactly what my format settings are set to. When you drag and drop, it's using the last settings that you currently had set up on the system, and whatever those were is what it's going to get when you drag this file into this setting. So whatever your last setting was is what it's going to choose, and it's not necessarily always the best setting. So I like drag and drop. I just like to point out sometimes it's not perfect. If it's the first time that you're importing a file, you might want to go in and verify that your settings are set up correctly. If you're importing 500 files in the course of 1 hour, then you might want to set it up the first couple of times, and then you drag and drop will work just fine, in my opinion. And now deleting unwanted clips. Here we can finally do some deleting. All right, so we have some clips that we don't need in the system. All of these clips we don't need in the system, to be honest with you. And so what we can do here is we can delete these clips. Now, notice the difference between when I delete a linked file versus an imported file. So these are the two linked files. And when I go to hit delete, notice that all it's asking me to delete is the master clips, because there is no media. The media was linked to, the media is part of the camera native originals, right? So the media doesn't exist in the Avid. I'm not actually going to delete the media off. It will not go and find the media on the hard drive and delete it. It will not delete anything but the pointers inside of Avid, meaning outside of Avid, this is a non-destructive process. Inside of Avid, this is destructive. I am deleting these master clips. They will be located in that attic we referred to, that place you can go back up things up from, but it is a destructive process. I'm gonna delete, notice it's gone. When I go to delete imported clips, notice what these say. They say delete master clips and the media files associated. Are you sure you want to delete the video, or maybe you just want to get rid of the audio? So notice you get a lot more options with imported media because Avid controls that media. It's part of the native media file structure. It can see everything with that media. It knows what the media is. It's created the media. It has a lot more access and control. And so you get more control and options when you go to delete it. When I go to delete, I love this. It defaults to cancel. Just like when you went to go empty the trash, it will always default to cancel. You have to choose delete, meaning when you go to do something destructive, Avid wants to make sure you're in full control. This is an opportunity for you to stop and reread, is how I look at it. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Am I sure I want to do this? Did I select the right thing? Everyone, you saw me earlier today while I was teaching, grab the wrong bin and delete it. And so it is important when you go to delete files that you're sure that you want to get rid of what you're going to delete. All right, now we're at kind of the fun phase of the systems. We're talking about on the bottom of page 54, watching the footage and working with the footage. It mentions the first step of organizing your footage is to simply watch it. At the most basic level, you need to be able to identify clips, name them, rename them, add comments. More importantly, you're watching the footage with a critical eye to see what works and what doesn't work. I worked on a project or a TV show. I didn't work on the TV show. I assisted with a TV show called Modern Family. And I remember meeting an editor who could look at the dailies once and know exactly which was the best clips. She was pretty amazing when it came to editorial. Literally, other people would need to rewatch dailies multiple times. And this one person could just look at dailies and understand what clips were going to be the right clips. So if we look at our clips and we start to go through these,
tell me what's going through your mind as you
the rock climbing, for instance, which we're going to start with for not the exercise, but this module.
The approach to the route.
Well, we have some interview clips, which is going to be our bedrock foundation of this story, probably. And then we have these cutaway clips, which are shots of carabiners being hooked up. What is the movie that's coming to mind right now that was the won the Oscar? Solo, of course, which talks about free rock climbing. These guys are crazy.
You gotta reach way far up here. There's not much.
But at least this person here is using the carabiner. You can see that some of these clips are better than others. You notice that some of the shots are a little bit more actiony.
Yes.
You're going to want to identify these clips. Maybe this is when it's a good time to go through script view in your bin, which we remember covered in module 1, and say, man, this is the money shot. This is a great shot. This one right here is boring. Like this guy just staring. There's no action in the shot yet. Really, there's no action at all. He's just kind of walking. But at the end, there's a little motion. But it doesn't show you rock climbing, like, for instance, this shot might. I was expecting his hand to come a little bit sooner. But there we go. My point being is on page 55, it talks about what we're looking for when we're going through our footage. Which performances are the best performance? Which performances are the weakest performance? Which moments are the most believable? Which are the least believable? When do you find yourself getting absorbed in the material? Like, is there stuff that you find is more riveting than other material? How extensive is the coverage? What is the sound? What is the sound define? And are the sound presets where you need them to be? Is it hard to hear or understand the dialogue? So there's a couple of things you want to pay attention to when you're, obviously, we're not teaching you how to become master editors, but the idea here is how to use the Avid and enhance your editorial skills here. And we do that by looking for those best performances, watching these clips over and over. For Matt and Levi, I believe are you guys editors or are you gentlemen engineers? If you don't mind me asking, the two students in the class. Oh, you two are editors, so you guys work at Mango. Oh, for Premiere. Oh, perfect. So this is kind of a connection between Avid and Premiere for you guys. Perfect. Let me go back to sharing the screen just so I can show you what we're doing here. All right, so Premiere and actually Avid work very similar, and you can actually set up your Premiere interface to look more like Avid and vice versa. I would argue that in 2019, this whole snapping thing was kind of came from Premiere, where I was using it first. Long story short, you guys are editors. You understand the idea of playing clips and looking for media. What I'm going to now focus on is how to use the tools and not the creative aspect. On page 55, we dive a little bit into what it means for the creative aspect. But what I really want to cover for right now is the technical aspects of it. So on the bottom of 55, it talks about how do you play a clip. Gentlemen, you can double click a clip, which will load immediately into the source window. Now, here's a rule. Clips will only ever load into the source window. They are not meant to load into the sequence window. Sequences will load into the record window, i.e. the timeline. Can I load a sequence into the source window? And the answer is yes, you can, but you must physically drag and drop it in there. If you double click a sequence, it will automatically think it's going to load into the record monitor. Again, one more time, clips, when you double click on them, they load into the source window, will only load into the source window. When you drag them to the record window, it thinks you want to edit. So it thinks you're adding it to the timeline. Remember that. That's an editing functionality at that point. That's kind of like the drag and drop editing, which we're not going to necessarily get into today, but is very much available in Avid Media Composer and has been there. Did I just drag and drop some edit footage by accident? No. Okay, good. Where was I? All right. So there we are. On page 56, it talks about playing media. Now, because you guys mentioned you were Adobe Premiere editors, I want to point out a couple of things for you gentlemen, is that they have at this top here, they have time code for all the clips, and they have the clip name, and you'll notice down here at the bottom, they have the sequence name, right? And this is known as the clip menu. I'm sorry, my Zoom options keep popping up, so it's blocking me from choosing the clip menu for the source side. So let me just hide this for a second. And there, sorry, gentlemen, one more time, I'm gonna try this. Oh, is there a way to make this smaller? Oh, I know. I can move it over here. Okay, perfect. All right, so there I can finally get to that menu that I'm looking for. So what I'm getting at here is you can actually load. So if I command A, I can drag all these clips into that window. And now it will load up to, I think it's 15 or 20 of them alphabetically within the clip drop-down menu without me having to go back and reload each individual clip. So this basically keeps a history of every clip that you worked with, that you edited with. So instead of having to go back to a bin to find a clip that you were working on, and you were just working on that clip, you'll notice that that clip will be located underneath this drop-down menu. So again, multiple ways to load clips into a menu. You can drag and drop, you can double click, you can command all and load multiple clips at once, and it's pretty flexible. In order to play a clip, as you've been noticing, I've been dragging this green bar, it's pretty straightforward. In order to play, in every application, I believe spacebar does play, but we also have something called JKL, which is explained on page 56. Now, JKL is basically a mimic of the shuttle, the shuttle wheels. If you guys remember decks, I know I was actually going to use the analogy of a VCR in this class this morning, and I realized, God, that makes me sound old. Who uses VCRs anymore? But on the old decks, like the Betacam decks and the Digi Betacam decks, they had these shuttle wheels. And these shuttle wheels, you could punch it in and punch it out to go fast or go slow. And so these were very popular tools in the days of linear tape decks. And up until like 2009, when the earthquake happened in Japan, decks were still extremely widely used across Hollywood and in other areas of the world as well. So JKL is equivalently the keyboard equivalent of the shuttle wheel. Now, in order to understand it, if I hit L once, it plays at normal 30 frames. If I hit L twice, oops, let me do the sequence since it's a little bit longer. If I hit L twice, it doubles the frame rate to 48. 3 times 72. And then after 3 times 4, it drops audio and you even get a fifth. So the same can be said about J. J is play backwards. You hit it once, it's 24 frames. Twice, 48 frames, you still hear audio. 3 times 72 frames, you still hear audio. 4 times audio drops out, 5 times audio drops out. So the system can do an audio equivalent scrub up to 3x real-time fast forward or rewind. But if I hit L once, then twice, 3 times, that's as much audio as we can get. 4 times, because you're scrolling through the sequence, audio will cut out. Now, that is using that's using JL as fast show. The way when you would spin it so you can go really fast. That's basically how we're using K and L right now. K is the false key. Now, if you take your middle finger on your left hand or right hand, you can also, by the way, if you're left-handed, you can map this on your keyboard so that it's ASD. There are a lot of different ways you can configure this. So you can talk to me offline afterwards and we can talk about left hand versus right hand configurations. But if you take your middle finger of your left hand and you place it on K, you'll notice that your index finger and your pointer finger perfectly fit J and L. So when you're hitting play forward and play backward,
Encourage my passion
it starts to
of rock
become this.
climbing.
I play a couple of instruments. It starts to feel like playing an instrument a little bit at a certain extent because you start to get really good with these key combinations and
I'm sure.
the exact same here, or Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve. Now, in order to get the slow shuttle, you have to hold down K and you can hold J down and you're going to get a 6 or 8 frame approximation. Or if you tap it in 1 frame, even though it says 6 in there, if you look at the play button, it tells you the head counter. If I hold down K and tap J once, it actually is only moving 1 frame at a time. Oops, I went into trim mode by the way. If I hold down K and tap L, it's moving forward 1 frame at a time. If I hold down K and hold down L, we're going to get a slow shuttle. What this allows me to do is slowly look over the footage. So this is like if you punch in that shuttle wheel and you wanted it to go really slow, you've got a couple of frames versus to zoom through, go all the way to the end. And then I just need to pinpoint around this area. JKL does take some practice, but I highly encourage you to start using it in every application that you possibly can, because one, it's a universal tool across all applications, which means wherever you put that middle finger on JKL, you're going to find when I'm in a media composer configuration setup, I have my right hand on the mouse because I'm right-handed, and I have my left hand on the keyboard with my middle finger on K. That's literally how I position my keyboard. And I have memorized the keyboard with my left hand based on the K position. And 20 years of using the keyboard for media composer helps as well. But my point being is one hand is always on the mouse, one hand is always on K, J, and L. All right, I think I beat that technique dead, but it's very important for you to understand, and it's very, very useful. The next thing we're going to cover is adjusting audio levels in our source clips, which is actually really cool. So you'll notice here we have audio files, and when I double click, well, first of all, I have my audio mixer already opened up in my left-hand side. Gentlemen and ladies, if you don't have your audio mixer opened up, you go to your tools, audio mixer, and it should open up. Remember, mine was originally floating when I opened up my audio mixer, but then I dragged it down here and I set it up as an editorial workspace. So my audio mixer is always open with my audio tool simultaneously. Now notice that my audio mixer changes when I select between my record side and my source side. When on my source side, all it's showing me is the source media and the audio clips with the source media. If I take a look at the track selector windows, notice there's only one audio clip and just a video track. So I'm only seeing one audio track over here. But if I go to my record side, I'm going to see much more than one audio track. I'm going to see my A1, my A2, my A3, A4, which is a stereo track, is stereo. And if I make this wider, you're also going to get what they call a master track. And that's when working with audio to control the master volume of the overall sequence as well. So you get a lot more options. What we want to do right now is we're just changing audio for our source clips. A lot of times if they're shot on pickup cameras, you can be recording native audio from like a DSLR camera, and that audio is usually wild and really loud. And so you usually want to drop the audio. Notice in the book on page 57, they usually say between -8 and -20 dB. Now notice when I go to move the audio sliders that it gives me a number down here at the bottom. So I can do this very linearly meaning feel like an old school mixer, grabbing a slider, or I can actually just go in here and type in a number. Or negative 18. Or if I'm not happy, I can hit the option key and it defaults it back to 0. Option click that parameter and it defaults it back to 0 so that I can start over again. Now, what the book is basically saying to you is that this is background footage. This is the cutaway footage. I'm more than likely, if you take a look at a sequence, I'm more than likely to have talking.
The Headwear has partnered with me in order to encourage my passion of rock climbing.
With certain clips, I want to lower the decimal levels of the audio, so I want it to be background music. I want it to be already set up as narration music. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that clip, and I'm just going to drop it to like -8 to -20. Again, the book says there's a wide range depending on what you're dealing with. If you've got a guy driving a motorcycle through a race car rally, it's going to be extremely loud and you're going to need to work with it differently. I've got a guy in natural surrounding where there's no ambient, there's no loud vehicles, there's only him climbing, and there's only essentially gnat sound with every once in a while the sound of his hand touching the rock. So that to me is not going to require a massive adjustment like you might have if you have race cars as your background audio. Let's see here. Do we have any stereo audio clips? Yeah, we do. If we go into our music bin and we double click a audio clip that's stereo, notice that we basically, if you take a look, your slider is already set up where the audio is panned left and right, and we can change our levels up and down through our slider. So it works pretty much the same way. It's very easy. With audio, with like music, you tend to, I tend to have it always louder. I will be honest with you, when I was an editor, my number one feedback from my producers was, can we make that a little bit softer, the music? We always tend, especially as editors, to have the music a little hot. Music is recorded at its highest volume possibly, so when it's brought in, it's usually already peaked out. And so we usually want to bring music down. This is that. Now, Avid is real time. It takes a second to catch up. Now, we probably want to not use this is the situation where we're probably going to bring our audio up and down. But for right now, all we're doing is setting up basic audio levels on our clips and our individual music clips and our individual audio clips. Here's another one. I'm going to bring that one down to -12. Oh, this one's just going to be. We're going to go ahead and pull this one as well. All right, perfect. All right, now on page 57 over to page 58, it talks about marking clips and using the in and out buttons for clips. Let's talk about that a little bit because that will probably be our last little thing that we do for today. I'm going to leave. Well, we're going to end this on the end of this module, but I'm going to be reaching out to Matt and Levi independently to make sure your media and projects are set up so that you can do exercise 2 on your own for tonight. And then we're going to do exercise 3 as a group tomorrow. Now, the last part of this module is about marking in and out points and comments. Now, an in and out point is essentially you're telling the system what part of the clip you want to use for editorial. Now, in Avid Media Composer, there, I like that part, right when his hand comes into the frame, right? So I want to mark an in, and this is what the in and out points look different depending on the nonlinear application that you're using. Avids look like little reverse C's is the best way to put it. This is what an endpoint looks like. Notice when I make an endpoint, you get these little scissor frames on the representative frame to show you that there's a mark there. If I move away from that, notice the frames go away, but if I go back to it, there's my little scissor marks to show you. And then the out mark is that key right there that looks, again, like a normal C. Now, if you take a look at your keyboard, or if you take a look at page 59, it shows you how to make in and out marks. I'm going to switch this off for a second just so we can talk. You guys don't mind here. Stop sharing. And I have an Avid keyboard at my disposal. Of course, all my wires get caught up in here. And I just kind of wanted to show it to you guys because you'll notice by default, we have in and out points are on the I and O, but they're also on the E and R in case you're left-handed. So these are mapped to your keyboard. And this is, if you're going to memorize a keyboard shortcut, this would be what I would memorize today because it's pretty straightforward. In is an in mark, out is the out mark. Again, right there on our keyboard, you can see them. And then you'll notice we have go to in and go to out on Q and W up here in the corners. So your keyboards, if you're using an Avid keyboard or if you're using a keyboard, it's set up in an Avid manner. It's actually, whether you have Avid stickers on the keyboard or not, the IO keys are in and out, or the ER keys are in and out as well. It doesn't matter whether the system has stickers or does not have stickers. So marking in and out points, this is the first part of editorial. Now, something that we're going to get into tomorrow is 3-point editing. And 3-point editing requires 3 points. Now, if you notice here, I'm going through my clips and I'm marking an in and an out. That's 2 points, which means I'm going to need another point in order to make an edit. Every edit, no matter what type of edit it is, whether you give it in and out points or not, every edit is considered a 3-point edit, meaning that there are at least 3 points in order for it to determine how long is the clip, how long is the edit, and where does the edit go. You can determine duration based on the source clip or the record timeline, meaning I can say I want you to edit from here all the way to the end of the sequence. That's a different way of setting up 3 points. Currently now I have 4 points. And so one of these points are going to get overridden and it's going to go with the shortest point it finds, meaning right here. If I have 4 points when it needs 3, which we're going to get into tomorrow, it's going to have some confusion associated with it. So again, all I'm doing today right now is we're just marking in and out points and getting comfortable using the Avid keyboard I, O, or E and R, or using the Avid interface Now, notice the system doesn't stop playing when I mark in and out points using the interface. This is a new feature, 2018.12, which means if you don't have Media Composer 2018.12 or above, you won't get live play, which is what this is called, meaning when I'm marking in and out points touching the interface, that is live play. All right. Now, the last thing it talks about, the last 2 things it talks about on page 60 and page 61, and then again, we're going to end this session, Matt and Levi, and I'm going to reach out to you each individually just to make sure your Avids are set up and you guys are good to go. So after this session is over, I'm going to individually call you each and make sure you're good to go for the classes. Just to make, I'll give you a 10-minute break and then I'm going to call you just to make sure you guys don't go anywhere. Stay in front of your computers because the class isn't over. We're just going to do the configuration at the end of the class. Since we're in webinar mode, I'm going to end that webinar after this last lecture. And the last part of the lecture is talking about script view. And we've gone through this quite heavily, but remember, script view allows us to add comments. So when we're picking music, like for that music there, I might have decided this is the song to use. And I might decide for the rock climbers, this is the sound bite right here. Use second sound bite. So comments are extremely important for communicating with producers, for understanding, it's communicating with assistant editors, communicating with facilities. It allows you to essentially work with your team in a very non-destructive way. It allows you to add more information to the clip that might be pertinent, and or to use that information to edit the clip with. Now, the last thing the book mentions, which I actually, ironic today, is saving. The last thing that we're going to cover in this webinar, and again, Matt, Levi, I'm going to give you a call in 10 minutes, but is saving your work on the bottom of page 60. And it talks about, it is important to save and back up your work. Although Media Composer automatically saves, we mentioned that it saves every 15 minutes based on the autosave interval. Remember that we can change the autosave interval by going to File, Settings, User, and then the bin settings, and there's the autosave. But back to the book. You can manually save a project at any point that you want. If you notice an asterisk at the bin, this is actually really neat, guys. Take a look at here. You notice how there are these little asterisks at these bins? It's telling me that I've made a change and it's not been saved yet. It's actually telling me that I'm not saving. So there's two things you can do. You can hit Command S on your keyboard or Control S, and it will save the active bin, or you can go File, oops, have your bin container windows selected. Your bin container window needs to be selected for the second option. If you want to save all at once, select the bin container, save all. If you only have one bin selected, and I'm just going to make a comment here to add some extra stuff here. So notice I typed something into these clips. Notice now my bin has changes that have not been saved. And I might do this for a couple of clips. Now notice this has bins. Now if I hit Command S while working with just this bin, notice music doesn't get saved. But if I go and click the container window and then hit Command S, music gets saved. Does that make sense with everybody? So making sure if you have an active bin and you make a change, only that bin, when you hit Command S, is going to be saved. But if you've made changes to multiple bins, for instance, I've added comments to each one of these bins, and I want more comments to this bins, notice that when I go and save in the rock climbing bin, it's not saving music in sequence. So I want to make sure I have my bin container window selected and then hit Command S and it saves all. Honestly, it's the sequence window that's going to be most important to me, because once you capture your footage and you bring it into the system, that is going to continually change. You're going to be continually editing your sequences as you move forward, if that makes sense. All right. So we're at the end of module 2, and there's an exercise, and I can see Matt and Levi are still on. And Matt, I know that Levi, you guys have been talking with Zuri. Oh, it looks like Levi lost. So I'm going to contact Matt first. In about 10 minutes, Matt, I'm going to reach out to you, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that you're all set up for tomorrow's class as well. And then for everybody else joining us on Facebook, thank you for listening and paying attention. We are offering this class through Key Code Education. Remember, we have a calendar online if you're looking for Resolve, Adobe Premiere, Photoshop. This is a great time to learn if you're stuck at your house right now. It's a great time to learn Resolve. It's a great time to learn Photoshop. Photoshop's one of those programs you don't realize you need to know how to use until you learn it. So remember, take a look at keycodeeducation.com, and there's a calendar for classes. If you are ETP, and if you don't know if you're ETP, just reach out to myself or anyone at Key Code Media, and we'll have someone respond. ETP students will have classes for free. So any class on that schedule will be free to ETP students. The Employment Training Panel, the state qualifies you as priority 1 individuals and wants to retain your jobs in the state of California. So they are offering you advanced training to advance yourself as a professional filmmaker. Please take advantage of that. And for everybody else, I want to wish you guys a safe and wonderful evening, and we will be talking to you tomorrow.